The meeting is now recording.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. It is 3:08 on February 4th, and this is a meeting, and we're calling to order for the MWPA Advisory Technical Committee. Allison, can we have a roll call, please?
Bolinas Fire District. City of San Rafael Marinwood Community Services District.
Present.
City of Larkspur.
Present.
County of Marin. Canfield Fire Protection District.
Present.
Muir Beach Community Services District. Novato Fire District.
Present.
Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. Southern Marin Fire District.
Present.
Stinson Beach Fire Protection District.
Present.
Town of Corte Madera.
Present.
Town of Fairfax. Town of Ross. Town of San Anselmo.
Present.
A quorum is present with 8 members.
Thank you, Allison. Do we have any adjustments to the current agenda? Seeing none, at this point, we'll go ahead and open it up for public expression. And the public is welcome to address the Advisory Technical Committee at this time on matters that are not on the agenda and that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your microphone when not reporting out. Allison, do we have any raised hands in the audience?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members, and there is no public comment.
Do we have any public comments that have been submitted via email?
No.
Okay, I will take that as a no email.
I'm sorry, I thought you heard me. No, we don't have any.
Okay, we do not have any public comments from the public. We'll go ahead and close the public expression portion of the meeting, and that will be moving on to item 5, which is the Executive Officer's Report.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think everyone had a full slate of meetings today. I'll start off with a quick review of the Board of Directors. We had a pretty successful retreat to start working on our mission, vision, and values for the MWPA. Unfortunately, it was still in a remote fashion because of COVID, but there was a lot of learning about each board member amongst each other. They actually interviewed each other as part of the process and then had to introduce the person that they interviewed. And I think that really helped. And Lynn, thank you for participating. Ruben, too bad you accepted the position of the chair of the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association and you had to prioritize them over us, but we'll live with that. But one of the reasons why we asked for the chair and vice chair of the operations committee and the advisory technical committee to participate in that process is to develop similar conversations within your committee. So you don't have to go as formal as we did with the board, but please provide us feedback similar along the lines of the questions that were asked during that retreat. And I can give you the template of questions if you need them. You know, what does success look like in 8 years? What does it look like in 2 years from now to create that success in 8 years? What are our values that are important for the MWPA? Because we really want that mission, vision, and values not just to be from the board down. We want to be able to receive input from all levels of the organization. And we did something that was pretty unique on this one, and that was to actually have breakout rooms for the members of the public. And they went through the same breakouts as what the board members did, and we're incorporating that information into the process. So Ruben and Lynn, I asked you guys to, you know, it may not be through a meeting format, but in any way that you can get that type of feedback to us, that'd be awesome.
I'd be happy to, Mark. I received quite a bit of feedback from some community members in Novato and San Geronimo.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. We had our executive committee meeting today at 10, went very well. The highlights of that is that we received our latest memo from Remy Moose Manley, who's our environmental consultant legal team. And that really helped guide our request for proposals for an environmental consulting firm to help us with our environmental compliance. And so now we're moving forward with that draft. I received excellent input, and we expect to be able to push that draft out for issuance after our board meeting on the 18th. Something that I think that is of note for you guys as local member agencies is that this will be our primary firm for our core projects, but we're also building into the request for proposals that they offer the same fees and rates to all of our member agencies. So if you have a project that requires environmental compliance, we are actually encouraging you to use the same firm because that'll help create consistency across the all MWPA projects, but also helps with the bandwidth issues that agencies might be having. It could be, Jesse, I'll use Stinson Beach as an example. You don't have much of a staff, so that would be quite a workload to get that done. And then I'll look at the other side of the coin and look at Lynn, is that you have a decent staff, but $500,000 worth of local mitigation projects can take up a lot of your time. So if we can help provide a firm to take some of that workload off of your plates, we think it's a win-win on that. We are also going to be looking at creating our strategic communications plan in partnership with Fire Safe Marin. And there's a group called Grizzly Corps that attaches recent college grads with organizations like ours that are specifically working towards fire resiliency. And we'd get if we apply for that position and we receive that position, we get a recent college grad for 11 months of service for $20,000. So they get experience working in an organization like ours, and we get the added depth. Finance committee will be spinning up here pretty quick to create our next year's budget, and how that aligns up with the advisory technical committee and operations committee is that's where you guys are going to basically get your ceiling of what the operations budget and the plan of work can get to. And right here, and some projects have already been approved for like Zone Haven. We'll take that off the top. Other fees and services we'll have to take off the top. And for sake of argument, let's say $10 million is the operations committee's ceiling. And then operations committee, advisory technical committee will start making their plan of work. You guys will prioritize that plan of work. And it's likely that some projects are going to fall above the line. They'll get recommended to the board for approval. And some projects will end up below that line. And then we'll just have to tackle them in the next budget year. So that's what the finance committee will be working on. And then our Citizens Oversight Committee has been putting a lot of effort towards the development of their bylaws and working out the mechanisms of how we can have a proactive Citizens Oversight Committee rather than a reactive COC. A lot of COCs end up writing a report at the end of the year and it says, well, you probably shouldn't have done this. You probably shouldn't have done that. That was great. That was awesome. And instead, we'd rather have a more proactive approach that by the end of the year, if something pops up during the planning process that may not be in alignment with our JPA language, we would like a mechanism for the COC to be able to catch that now. And so we can make a course correction before we expend funds in a way that's not consistent with the JPA language. And with that, I'm open to any questions from the committee.
Hey, Mark, what was the name of the firm for the environmental impact reports and studies?
Well, Remy Moose Manley is our legal firm, but we have that we are putting out the request for proposals for an environmental consulting firm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Going to item 6 is the bylaws development. At our last meeting, we kind of created a bylaws subcommittee, which included was it Todd Lando and myself and 2 other individuals. I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind today, too many meetings. But we created draft bylaws and then sent them out within our committee for review and then sent them back to MWPA for review. They went ahead and sent it out to legal counsel and then made some recommendations. And what we have before us today is actually the final draft of our bylaws. And hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at them and see if you guys have any comments on that.
Ruben, this is
Yeah.
Jesse. I haven't got a chance to get them yet.
Okay.
If you could send them over another
Yeah,
email.
We'll make sure you get them.
Thank you, man.
The only thing that we didn't put in the bylaws, according to the JPA, the advisory technical committee is supposed to meet twice a year. I didn't put hard set dates on it because we wanted to be a little flexible early on right now, and where we may have to meet more than twice a year just until we start getting our committees up and running and start getting into our workflow plans. So we left that kind of a fluid motion, or a fluid timeline. So all we're going to have on there is 2 meeting dates per year. So we can meet as subcommittees and try to work with the ops committee to try to figure out a date. Does anyone have any objections to that?
Not at all.
And Ruben, if I may add, if it just takes the president of the board to approve any additional meetings that you may want to have as a full committee.
Okay, perfect. With that, do we have any motions on the bylaws that we have before you? A motion to approve the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Advisory Technical Committee bylaws.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
So we have Fred Hilliard as first, and
And second.
then Todd Lando as second. Allison, can we do a roll call?
City of
Um,
San,
If I may interrupt, Ruben, we probably should go to public comment before you do the roll
Oh,
call.
correct. Do we have any public comment on the bylaws that are present?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, do we have any written comments or submittals regarding the bylaws?
And Ruben, we do have the Q&A is turned off for this session. So, we didn't receive any emails prior to the meeting. So
Sure. Thank you, Mark.
nothing along those lines.
With that, we have a motion to adopt the bylaws by Fred Hilliard and a second by Todd Lando. Allison, may we get a vote?
City of San Rafael Marinwood Community Services District.
So I'm in the same boat as Jesse. I haven't gotten a chance to review them yet, so I should probably abstain if that's not going to mess up the vote.
I think that actually takes us out of majority for quorum for a vote, wouldn't that, Mark? If
No,
we have-
you have to have a majority of the quorum present.
Okay, copy.
So,
Yeah. I don't object to the vote. I just don't feel confident in passing one.
City of Larkspur,
Yes.
Kentfield Fire Protection District,
Yes.
Novato Fire District,
Yes.
Southern Marin Fire District,
Yes.
Stinson Beach Fire Protection District,
Abstain.
Town of Corte Madera,
Yes.
Town of San Anselmo.
Abstain.
Then the motion passes with 5 votes in favor.
Okay, thank you, Allison.
And for the record, we do have Steve Marcotte in the meeting now.
Hey, Mark, I think that Jordan came on as me. Because I just emailed him the Zoom meeting. And I
Okay.
see myself on here twice. So I think he may have logged in as me possibly.
I
Okay.
think you're just twice as important as the rest of us, Lynn. So,
So I think you just got the answer to your question.
yeah, thank you. So I'm having some technical difficulties today, you guys. Sorry about that.
And perhaps Jordan, were you able to hear the discussion on the bylaws and able to levy a vote?
Yes, I was listening. Yes is my vote.
Thank you. That's County of Marin. And I'll call for Bolinas Fire District.
I will abstain as I just arrived on the call, so I haven't had a chance to participate.
Thank you. I'll amend that the motion passes with 6 members in favor.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. Okay, moving on. Item number 7 is the project work plan forms. So as all of you recall, last year, early on with the MWPA, like sometime in January or February, we pushed out work plan forms. I'm trying to identify what your work projects were for both core funding, local, and defensible space. MWPA came back and said there was going to be no core funding available for the first year. So we were limited to 2 pots of funding, which was your defensible space and your local funding. And with that form, it was pretty basic. And we've gotten direction from the operations committee that to go ahead and have an opportunity to take a look at the existing form and try to make any changes, improvements, and redesigns that we possibly can. So Lynn, are you able to share your screen?
Let's see. I am actually on my private laptop here. And I don't think I have them on this computer. Let's see. Work plan draft.
Or if not, I may have them available if.
Here, I have it. Hold on.
Allison, are we able to make Lynn Osgood a
Can you
co-host?
see
So
that?
she can share?
Can you guys see that?
No, we're going to allow, see if you can share.
I did set it up that panelists can share.
Okay, hold on. I want to get back on my Zoom screen. Okay, hold on. Let's see. I don't know if I'm going to be able to share this.
And while Lynn's working that out, just to let you know, the phone number you see on your screen as 9095 is Dan Mahoney from the town of Ross.
Welcome, Dan.
Ruben, I sent it to you.
Okay, I'll pull mine up right now. Let's see if it'll
Bring
come
it
up.
We see your desktop.
Here we go. So this was the previous form
Mhm.
in the unfilled format. Can you guys see that? So this is the form that was kind of sent out last year. And it had some examples of what a project would look like. And I'll pull up my next indicator here. And so, for example, here's one that we did with the Blue Rock community in Larkspur. So it basically gave a description of what your project was, what the rationale was, any concerns and challenges that we may find in trying to implement the project, any kind of environmental or environmentally sound practices, excuse me. Basically, this was your CEQA, whether it was a negative declaration or an exempt, or whether you put your CEQA report was within this area, stakeholders, timelines, outcome, and so forth. And then with a map. So right now we have a good opportunity to kind of revamp that form. I believe, Lynn, did you have a copy of one? Here, let's see.
That was, so the environmental compliance one, that's on it.
So here's one here.
So
Here's an example of a form that Lynn started working on, just to try to expand it.
I changed it around I added some areas and I based it quite a bit of it off of some of my CAL FIRE grants. So it's actually quite a bit different. And it goes into a little bit more depth. But it's just a draft, just an idea. So you have your, your zone, your project name, the type of organization, and then I would add drop downs to that because this would be online. What type of organization, if you have a sponsoring organization, which is usually your department, who your manager is, for which primary activity is funding requested, your timelines, locations, and then your CEQA compliance. That's a larger section for that. And then I do have a CEQA checklist as well that I did. And then project area statistics. So how many dwellings are in the project area, how many acres, field treatment acres. And then if we wanted to add anything regarding the hazard severity zones, or if it's in a local or federal area, and what are your limited air factors, communities at risk. Does your project address that? Does your project address disadvantaged low-income communities? And there's a second page.
Can I ask a question, Lynn?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Sean Condry, San Anselmo.
Hi.
So on that form, I think that someone helped me fill that out before with Marin Fire, but one of the questions, and maybe this will be talked about more or being looked at with our attorney, but the CEQA process and what people are doing.
Right.
I'm just curious, does anybody know where that's headed and what's going on with that in terms of projects?
Here's another form that Lynn has been working on this, basically like your CEQA checklist. And we can talk more about that, Lynn, if you can kind of describe this side of it.
Yeah, so basically everything that I've grabbed, I've cut and pasted from basically state agencies. So, and this is something that I've had to fill out for a CAL FIRE grant. So it has that checklist with drop downs typically. And the second page is actually, shouldn't be with this document, but it would be if you were going to fill out a notice of exemption. And when you fill this out, you'll go through a larger checklist to make your determination and how you came to that determination.
And so here's the checklist that you was talking about.
This probably looks familiar to you.
Yeah, actually, and I'm wondering, are these new forms, you're going to be sending these out to all the agencies?
This is just a draft. These are just ideas put on paper for us to discuss.
Okay.
And so what we'll do, Sean, is I'll stop sharing here. The intent behind, or the direction that we got from the operations committee, was to take a look at the existing forms that we had and try to figure out where were they lacking and how can we improve them to where when we submit our package up to the operations committee, we've basically checked every single box, we've vetted everything. That way we've got our CEQA compliancy if the project requires it. If it's categorically exempt, for example, your defensible space anywhere within 100 feet of a structure, 10 feet of a roadway or so forth, you've at least hit that environmental compliancy and hit every checkbox on the way there. So when it gets submitted, it doesn't get kicked back to our committee here.
So the reason I'm asking, I don't know how far we want to go down this, and this is not, I know this is more about the forms, but with the CEQA process, looking at CAL FIRE and previous projects, it looks like they're mostly categorically exempt, but there's also sometimes a requirement to look at habitat, right? So
absolutely.
I'm wondering with the technical advisory committee, if we want to look at something holistically that we do for all jurisdictions with one consultant, I don't know if that's within our purview, but I'm just throwing that out there. So.
And Sean, this is Mark, and that's what I was referring to earlier with our environmental consultant request for proposals that we're pushing out, is that we're encouraging all the agencies to use that environmental consultant for MWPA funded projects. It'll primarily the contract between the firm and the MWPA will be for our core projects, but we're building it into the RFP that member agencies can use that same firm.
Okay. I'd like to, maybe I could talk to you more about that offline at some point, Mark, because I've dealt with this a little bit before, and I've got somebody that we're working with already. So,
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'll push the forms out so people can take a look at them. And, you know, like I said, it's a draft forms, and
Very draft.
it's the opportunity for us to try to make them the best we possibly can to make our jobs easier when we're submitting projects up to the operations committee for approval.
Okay, and you'll send those forms out to everybody on the board?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
And,
You're very
and
welcome.
Sean too, I think somewhere it needs to state that basically CEQA compliance needs to be done before any groundwork can begin. So that has to be written somewhere. in our
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of my question too. So thank you.
So, you know, you can move forward, but you can't do any groundwork until you've satisfied that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I've been working on right now. And I was wondering where this was going, because I've been literally jumping through these hoops this past week, and actually have another meeting about it at the end of this one. So thank you.
At this point, I'd like to open up to any questions from the members on the committee.
I have a few questions / comments, I guess. When you mentioned the idea of doing the forms online, I guess it's might be even backing up further, and I sort of love the idea of having an online submittal. But I just kind of want to hear a little bit more about kind of what the ops committee is thinking of that final work plan looking like. And then if we can talk a little bit about, are member agencies the only ones submitting work plans, or is that like a public open forum where like an HOA could be submitting a work plan?
Right, that's a really good point. Mark, you could probably answer that question.
Absolutely. So the member agencies are the agencies that need to submit anything for entrance into the work plan. Now, if you have an HOA that has a project that they would like to propose, and they would work through you, Quinn, at San Rafael Fire, then you would bring it forward.
And then talking about the online component to it, when we met with Chief Tyler at Novato, he basically showed us a platform that the city of Novato uses for their planning division and their planning department, where any project that's going under planning review gets put into this website where anyone from the public can actually look at it and see what the project is, show maps, show the description of it, and can show where we're at a status level. And the intent behind it was there's a backside to it for us as fire agencies where we're able to submit all the paperwork and all the documents, and then they get uploaded to this link. That's still in the preliminary, I guess, thought process or vision. And I believe Chief Tyler may have talked to Mark Brown about it a little bit, and to see if that's even a possibility.
It is, and we are going to be going in for a redesign of our webpage, and that's going to include a project management or project display page, very similar to the city of Novato. So it'll be a one-stop shop for everybody to look at the projects that are going on, the status, and timeline.
Yeah, and the other thing about that webpage is that it'll show little pin marks on wherever the project is. So you can click either on that pin mark, and that'll open up the page, or there's actually a one-line item similar to like a planning division or planning department review.
I think that sounds awesome, and I think the community would love that. And I think maybe even to feed that more, because Len, I think the template you put up, I love the extra details, but it also seems very specifically to like large open space vegetation management and not necessarily other types of projects. And so I'm wondering if in that form, you know, there's a drop down that builds core defensible space local funding requests right off the bat. And then within the core, we could even use the 4 or 5 kind of existing headers. And then based on that selection, the form might change, right? Because you don't need a GPS coordinate if you're doing outreach and education, but that falls under the core function.
Right.
That might be a suggestion.
Do we want to put together a committee to work on this?
Yeah, similar to kind of like what we did there with the bylaws, Lynn.
Yeah.
So do we have any members that are interested in maybe doing a subcommittee to kind of work on the forms and maybe work with Mark Brown on what that drop-down version of an app page would look like.
I'd be happy to work on that.
Oh, good.
So we've got Lynn Osgood, Quinn Gardner, Todd Lando, and Jesse Perry.
Yeah.
All right,
That would be a
perfect.
good number for you too,
Good
Ruben.
number. Okay, so I will, you guys have each other's contact information? If not, we'll get it to you.
I don't. I'd love to get some contact info.
Okay, we'll get everybody on together. And
Lynn
then,
is the committee chair.
What?
So, Lynn, you're the committee chair since you've done the draft documents to this point.
Oh,
By
thank
default. Yes. Am I allowed to make that decision?
I think you just did, Todd.
I'm a member of the committee, so.
There you go. Good, perfect. Do we have any questions from the committee members here? Okay, do we have any questions or open it up for public comment?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, we'll bring it back. Okay, so we've, so Lynn, you as a chair will go ahead and set up a meeting with the other members of the
Perfect.
subcommittee. Perfect.
And
Okay,
then whatever support you need from me, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
okay, moving on to item number 8. We kind of threw this on earlier this week for project work plan timelines. There's been a lot of questions going on, I believe, amongst ourselves, trying to figure out, one, what our timelines are, when do we need to have our projects in by? So that way for us as an advisory technical committee can look at them. From the ops committee, their vision is, since we have 5 op areas, we need to try to work within each other, within each op area. For example, San Rafael, you're basically one op area on your own. So most of your projects, you're working amongst your fire agency to try to figure out what you can. For us in the central Marin area, Ross Valley area, we've got a lot more agencies. We've got portions of the county of Marin. We've got Fairfax, Sleepy Hollow, San Anselmo, Ross, Kentfield, and Central Marin. So amongst ourselves, we need to try to work together to try to figure out what the most effective and efficient way to use those core fundings are. So that way we're not having competing projects and one core project can meet up and tie in with another core project. So for us as an op area, we need to work together. And then that way we can bring it forward to the ACT and then go from there, or the ATC, excuse me, and go from there. Fred and Southern Marin, you've got yourself, the city of Mill Valley, and portions of the county. So it's between yourself, whoever your representative is at Mill Valley, which I believe is yourself as well, and then working with Jordan Reeser at the county. So that way we can come up with projects that are the most efficient and effective.
And Muir Beach, add Muir Beach.
And your portions of Muir Beach as well.
Right.
And then Quinn, for us, between the San Rafael and the central area, there may be opportunities where the Central Marin Ross Valley area can come up with a project that ties in directly with San Rafael, since you border us on the northern portion of it, which also connects with Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. So within our areas, we can work together, especially if we're proposing something for those ridgelines. So that's kind of how at least Chief Tyler was envisioning for us to work, which to me, I think makes it a little more manageable. And then within the op area, we bring it back to the advisory technical committee, where we look at it to make sure at this point, are those projects meet the intent of the JPA? Do we have all of our paperwork boxes checked and everything before we can submit it to the operations committee? And if we have competing projects, where can we prioritize them? And can we fund 2 core projects at the same time within that op area? At that point, I'd like to open it up for any kind of discussion or questions from the board or from the members.
I guess my one thought would just be if what we want to put together within our zones, like if we want that budget to be like right at our 100% allocation, or if we actually want to be kind of aiming to go above that. So then we kind of put it to the ops committee, because with that 80% over, you know, the way the JPA is structured, the ops committee might determine that a certain project is a higher priority. And so we're not necessarily looking at proportional per year. So just trying to figure out kind of what folks are thinking about with their proposed budgets, if you will.
And if I may add, Ruben, one of the intents of the budget that we'll present to the ops committee as far as the ceiling, will also present what the operational areas have gained revenue wise. So you guys do know how much what that bucket is and what was gained within that op area.
Mhm.
And then just a reminder, that's only one of the prioritization tools. And I think your primary prioritization tool is going to be the risk assessment completed in the recent CWPP.
Yeah, and so when we're looking at these projects, as the CWPP is one component of it, and then the other one is using that house out approach. You know, when trying to figure out what our core funding goes, you know, it's house out, defensible space, how we can improve that, and then you start going to looking at your evacuation routes. Some core funding may be looking at LRAD, depending on where you're at within your jurisdiction. You know, different stuff like that. Anything else or comments on that component of it?
I mean,
Hey, Ruben, this is Larry. As we kind of move forward with this, and this might be something also for the forum subcommittee, as we start to identify projects, I think it would be beneficial either if we can create a Marin map layer that's accessible through the fire viewer, or through another component, maybe through the MWPA website, where we can start to visually see the location of these projects. And I don't know if that'll impact, you know, a section on that form where we get a little bit more data, where we can start tracking and showing how some of these back up to one another. And I think it's a great point with Sanderfell and Quinn. Certainly we have some areas too that I think would be interesting for all three of us to partner with, and might do some good service and cost sharing some of that project.
Larry, that's such a good idea. We already have it's such a great idea that we already have a layer that we just created in Marin Wrap that's specific to the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. We were able to put the Cal VTP treatable areas in it, our jurisdictional boundaries. And then Todd Lando and I are working with STI to be able to put the parcel level hazard analysis on that. And then the next step is to request Marin Map to give us access to project our projects onto that map.
Getting stuff done. Let's wrap it up.
Mark, I have a question related to the Marin Map. Because I'm trying to get my head around the local projects, defensible space, and then the other money. Will Marin Map show everything on it?
That's what we still have to work out. My desire is that any project that is actual, you know, on the ground type work, whether it's local mitigation or core, would be on that map. But those details are still need to be worked out with Marin Map.
Okay, because it's for me, it's been somewhat complicated, and I'm starting to get an understanding. The local money, the defensible space money, and then the other, I guess you're calling it core money. And that's been, I don't know if everybody here understands it very well, but it's taking me some time to start to understand it. So seeing a map and having that explained more at some point would be helpful for me. But
yeah, so maybe just going back into the three different buckets, Sean, you've got your core funding is 60% of the tax revenue collected. Basically goes for an entire op area to where we can do projects that are core for that, basically benefit the entire operational area. Then you've got a 20% defensible space inspection and home evaluation pot of money that is basically allows evaluators to go out and do individual home assessments. And then you've got another 20% pot of the tax revenue that goes towards local mitigation dollars. So you may have a project where we're going to clear the evacuation routes and the vegetation alongside of those roadways. Well, that would probably come out of your local mitigation dollars.
And that's what I'm working. That's what I'm working on now, is the local with the roads, with Dom. And I guess one of my questions though is, like, if you've got those three pots, 20, 20, 60, are you guys looking at how they all overlap? You know, because like defensible space could overlap some of the local, right? And I'm assuming that the core money will overlap some of the defensible space. Is that a good way of looking at it?
Yeah, and it could potentially, and Mark could probably answer to this better.
No, I wouldn't say, when you say overlap, I wouldn't say the monies overlap, but the missions may overlap. And, Ruben made an example of escape routes clearing being probably local mitigation. And there's a lot of truth in that, because most escape route roads will be within one jurisdiction, but there's going to be plenty of roads, and Shoreline Highway in Southern Marin would be a great example of an escape route that goes through multiple jurisdictions, and it would make sense to make that a core project.
Okay, yeah, I get that. That was kind of my question. And I'm just trying to, if we're doing things locally, you're doing defensible space and you're doing core, I guess then somebody is on top of making sure that everybody, we're not all working in our vacuums, right? And that's what we're all here for, I assume, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that it's a cohesive approach in terms of each pot of money and how that money and those projects are being done in coordination with each other. So,
yeah, so for example, Sean, there's areas of Central Marin that traverse, like for example, Greenberry Hills. It traverses both Kentfield and Larkspur. So what we would work within our op area is with Kentfield Fire to make sure that we're at least doing the same things. That way we can maximize our local dollars and be the most efficient as we possibly can.
Sorry,
Okay.
can I ask a question on that? Because it's a little different than, I guess, my understanding between core and local. Because kind of what I'm hearing is the idea that core funding has to span multiple agencies or jurisdictions, as opposed to core funding meeting those criteria that are spelled out in the core, which to me, in most cases, evacuation route improvement would actually qualify as a core function because evacuation route improvements there. Now, if that didn't get funded for some reason and approved by the Corps because of competing priorities, then it potentially could be up to an agency to say, well, we need to do this work right now, so we're going to fund it out of local. Because if the idea of core projects is they all have to span multiple agencies, I think especially for our zone and Novato zone, that kind of eliminates a lot of things that I believe fall under the function of the Corps.
I think that's a misunderstanding of what we're talking about here, though.
Yeah, Quinn, you can have core project that is just within one jurisdiction. They don't
Okay.
have to be cross-jurisdictional. It's encouraged to be cross-jurisdictional, but like you said, there's very different animals from north to south. Novato being only one agency in one geographical region, whereas, but it will be up to the operations or the first advisory technical committee to agree as a committee of where the projects are, how they're going to be prioritized, which ones fall above the line and doesn't. And, a single agency project within the Ross Valley may be less attractive than a multi-agency project. So when it goes to vote, it may not quite get the traction or the support as it goes up to operations and to the board.
Yeah, so for example, Quinn, San Rafael is his own operational area. So you have basically everything goes back to your op area.
Well, we have county.
Your local, your D space, and your core. So for you, with your core funding would stay within your op area. So most likely, if your core funding meets the intent of the JPA, my understanding is you would get that project approved. Similar to Novato, where it starts getting a little more, where we got to work in collaboration with each other, cross multi-jurisdictional, would be an example of the Central and Ross Valley area, where we traverse several jurisdictions and several municipalities. And that's where Sean and I, Larry, and then the members of Sleepy Hollow and Fairfax would work together in Ross to try to come up with a core project that basically can span across multi-jurisdictional areas, so that way it can get approved.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Does that sound just about right, Mark?
Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense. I think when I heard you say evacuation routes would be local, there were like some sirens going off for me, just because for me, a lot of the local evacuation route improvements were planning on core. And that does span the CSAs and Marinwood, and it's not actually just San Rafael, but so no, I think that makes sense.
I think what's helped me is just more of a focus on the scale of the projects. When we're looking at the local funding, where you got 20%, a much smaller pot of money, it's spread out, not, you know, maybe between homeowner grants and using examples from what we're doing here in Central Marin, did tree removals, you know, maybe treating a small section of roadway where there's a broom infestation versus a project that requires, you know, a bigger scope, a greater, you know, level of CEQA detail. I know it might be a project that's not categorically exempt and requires a deeper study. You know, those types of projects I'm envisioning are going to be funded through core funds through this Central Marin operating area where we are.
Okay, so that's kind of explaining the local defensible space and core projects, kind of how we need to work as op areas together to try to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of what we're trying to do. And on timelines, so we need to start trying to identify, at least locally within your op area, what these projects are going to be. Start filling out some of these forms, start thinking about that, whether it's going to need an environmental full CEQA analysis versus checking the boxes and making sure that you meet the categorical exemption of it. And I believe it's, and you can kind of correct me, Mark, on the timelines, is used, I believe, is the operations committee wants to see the first pass sometime in March or early April. And then they would then push it back to us if there's any corrections that would need to be made. And then we bring our second round with our final drafts back to the operations committee sometime in May for approval by the full board.
You nailed it.
Okay. All right, good.
Hey,
Finally
Mark,
got right.
This is Jordan. I just got a quick question about those numbers. And I remember, you know, I've seen the spreadsheet obviously for our local dollars, and just thinking about the county in particular, I guess a little selfishness here, you know, in our op area that, you know, West Marin, that, you know, involves the volunteer agencies a little bit, but they don't have much local money. But then we are also going to be engaged, obviously, in San Rafael with the CSAs down there in the Ross Valley zone, et cetera. Was there a spreadsheet that kind of generally captured what those numbers are for that 60% of that core? Just kind of trying to think through, you know, project scope and size and scale, when, especially when it's just me kind of planning for the Western zone.
There has been a spreadsheet, Jordan, but it's not to the detail that we need yet. The spreadsheet has been down to the agency, and County Fire brings in that complication that you intermix with so many areas. So I'll be working with my finance manager at Southern Marin, working with the assessor recorder's office to identify the actual proceeds, because Throckmorton, the tax proceeds from Throckmorton and Marin City goes towards the Southern Marin bucket. The tax proceeds from CSA 19 that's in county jurisdiction goes towards the San Rafael bucket, and portions of San Antonio Road. So county fire is a much different animal. So we're going to create a different spreadsheet that will list it by geographical areas rather than agency.
Cool.
It's going to be fun.
Oh, loads, I can tell.
Nice. Move on to section number D of item 8. One of the questions also came about was project funding reallocation flexibility. I know some of us early on have, similar to last year where we're spending X amount of dollars within one X amount of community or one specific community. Once we get out there with the contractors, we may fall way under what we projected under budgets. And we're trying to figure out what the flexibility is going to be able to reallocate the funds, say, of local mitigation dollars from one project area to the other. In particular, just because the time constraints and the availability of contractors, where I may have a contractor for a week and a half, and I may have been done in a week, and I still have them for another 3 or 4 days, where I can still use them on another project. And I guess the clarification may come from you, Mark, on what that flexibility is and what type of reporting is going to be needed from us at the advisory committee.
Well, fully support the flexibility, because we want to get the most amount of work done with the amount of money that we have, and not let bureaucracy get in the way of getting work done, right?
Mhm.
So if you get into that position where you need to adjust, then definitely work with your partners in the ATC and operations and bring me into the loop as soon as possible. And then I can work with the executive committee and the board to make any adjustments on the fly.
Okay, so it's just making a quick form, fill it out, make sure we got all our CEQA check boxes done,
Correct.
and then submit it if we need to.
And then I'll push it through the process to get it formally approved.
Okay, and then another question came about offline was, what happens if one jurisdiction decides to basically map out their entire zone and say, we're doing roadside defensible space throughout our entire community? Is that a project submittal where that will raise red flags, or?
If as far as core funding or local
No,
mitigation?
for local funding. Like say, for example, if I'll do Corte Madera, for example,
Mhm.
for our jurisdiction, if we just say, hey, our local mitigation dollars is going for defensible space and roadway side or roadway evacuation route improvements within the entire town of Corte Madera as one complete project for local funding.
As far as spending it along the lines of what our GPA says, no red flags there.
Okay.
Some of your compliance steps may become complicated.
Okay.
Can I ask
Go ahead, Quinn.
I was just gonna say a follow-up, because one of the things that we're kind of contemplating is what we've started dubbing open space D space. So whatever goes into our open space that would create the D space, if that makes sense. So to get up to that 100 feet. And so we were kind of just looking at almost putting in one core project as a not to exceed that's open space, D space, and then prioritizing the neighborhoods, the mapping, the compliance. But then essentially just kind of recognizing for FY 21-22, we're just working through that list until we hit our not to exceed, and then coming back 22-23 with kind of the continuation of that, just so we can really get that D space on all of our land around private property. Does that throw up red flags?
I don't think so, but again, it'll be part of our process where we have these are public meetings at the ATC operations and then final board approval. So we'll have complete transparency through it all. And then it will really be up to the board to say, all right, we feel this is in alignment with the JPA language or it isn't. Operations will have that same opportunity.
Okay. So
I may be totally missing the boat here, which, par for the course, right? But if it's local mitigation funding, I mean, we can just use it for whatever projects we want as long as it fits within the scope of the MWPA, right? I mean, we don't need to go to any committees or anything.
Maybe I misunderstood Ruben's question. I was talking about flexibility of the core projects requiring that approval of the board. When it comes to local mitigation projects, as long as you guys show in your budget reports that it went towards vegetation management projects that did not supplant something you had already been doing, then you have the purview to make changes.
So
okay, that was our concern.
That brings up kind of maybe a point that I or several of us are missing. That the project proposal forms that were submitted last year is the one that Lynn's been revising that we discussed today. We submitted project proposals for local mitigation funds last year because no core funds were allocated to those types of projects. So we're discussing projects that were submitted really to be funded locally. But it sounds like we may be sort of misinterpreting the intent of those proposals.
It's a little bit. So Todd, I mean, and it went to the board as part of the work plan packet, but when the board voted, they were only voting on the core allocations and they weren't voting on approving the local mitigation projects. So I suggest using the same form because that'll help us track across the MWPA what we're doing. But when you are submitting for a core project, I would call that an application.
Yeah.
If it's part of your local mitigation process, it would be like an informational form for the MWPA, so we know what you're doing with the money.
Yeah, I see that. So that there's a checkbox that our committee will add to that form. You
There
know,
you go.
what's the intent here?
Yeah.
And I think that this year there's this overlap that, you know, and things were fluid in the beginning. So that some of those proposals that were made might have originally been intended for core funding, but are now being funded locally.
Yeah, and last year shouldn't be used as what our template for moving forward is. You guys are creating the template of how to go through the process the right way this year.
Yeah, and that was my misunderstanding as well, is how in detail do we put the local mitigation dollars on the work plan or the application? But yeah, I agree. It's definitely informational to where it shows our transparency and where all the funding and where all the projects are happening. But yeah, I agree that we should definitely get as detailed as we possibly can with core dollars and work with ourselves and share any information that we find. You know, are we finding any difficulties getting some kind of CEQA compliancy that maybe another agency can help you with, or help you find in the interim that CEQA agency or that can help you do the reports.
And I think this group is the perfect mechanism for that resource sharing, idea sharing, and making sure that we're all pulling the rope in the same way.
Good. Okay, that clears that up. Then moving on to item E is the environmental compliance. I think we've kind of hit on it on every level. And where we're looking at for local dollars is just make sure that we've done any kind of environmental survey or any kind of quick environmental, whether you're categorically exempt, to make sure those boxes are checked. So that way there aren't any red flags. And then making sure that we do a full CEQA compliancy for any type of core projects that we submit. Any questions, comments on that portion of it?
I just say anxious to see what comes of this RFP that they're submitting for the you know, assistance with environmental review.
And Todd, what we discussed during the exec committee was we are using Santa Clara County Open Space's scope of work as our template for the scope of work piece, because our work is very similar to what Santa Clara is doing now. And the results of their RFP, they're very happy with. They felt it was a solid RFP. We've taken that, tuned it up even more. And so we're encouraged with the quality of the firm that will be.
Great.
Mark, can I ask a question about the CEQA and the RFP?
Yep.
So is that just for core? What about, you know, local and defensible space? Because right now the town of San Samuel is looking at doing it itself for local, obviously. I'm just wondering if there's a way to do everything together. So.
And that for core, so that's what I've been talking about with the RFP. The RFP is for the core projects. And since it's core money from MWPA, we are the lead agency. For the local mitigation projects, the local agencies are the lead agency. However, we're building into the RFP that the local agencies can use the same firm. And then you would build that into your project costs and use that same firm. If you so desire, in order to take some workload off of your staff.
Definitely. Okay, well, that's what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and I'm just wondering like how long the RFP process would take, because obviously some local projects are moving as we speak. So.
And so if I get it approved, we're going to issue the RFP on February 22nd.
Okay. Thank you.
From what I'm getting to, Sean, is most of your local projects, if it comes under DSpace, is categorically exempt for the most part, if it's within 100 feet of a structure and 10 feet of a roadway.
That's what I read. I actually got a great PowerPoint. I don't know if you guys have seen it from CAL FIRE about the CEQA process and exemptions, but there's a caveat in there about you know, habitat and things like that I'm looking at. So anyway, I can talk to you more about that separately too.
So that's the checklist that Lynn's been working on, that we've been working with. You know, that goes through that process. You know, the fact that the project may or may not wind up being exempt, it doesn't exempt us from going through and reviewing it. So we document the scope of work, we document the location, we go through that checklist to make sure that none of the exceptions are triggered, and document the exemption through CEQA with that checklist. And you know, I think ultimately we're going to find, as we fine tune this, we're all going to be developing for the local funding smaller projects, or a really tight scope of work that has minimal impact and that is clearly within the boundaries of areas that where the exemptions exist. We'll still complete those checklists. We'll verify that we're not triggering an exception for a single, you know, a specific location, and be able to move forward with those projects real efficiently. Okay.
I'm just right now I'm looking at approaching it from a little bit different angle, but I'm talking to I think Megan Acevedo is the attorney for the MWPA, right? Is that correct?
That is correct. And any questions you have with Megan, please funnel them through me and I can push them along.
Okay, thank you.
And Ruben, this might be a good opportunity for public comment.
Yeah, I was getting ready to do that. Thank you. Good reminder. I'd like to go ahead and open it up for public comments. Allison, do you see if we have any hands raised?
Looking for any raised hands. Our first public comment will come from Christiana Conzer.
Hi. Sorry about that.
Oh.
A little feedback.
Sorry, Christiana, I muted you. I do see your name on the list twice. If you'd like to raise your hand on your other device, perhaps that would work better.
And make sure to mute one of them.
Oh, yes, perhaps that's the issue. I will test unmute you again here and see if we can have your public comment.
There we go. Sorry, I had logged into the meeting twice on accident. I'm an environmental consultant, actually, and I work for a company called HANA Resources. And I just wanted to, I've been following this CEQA discussion for the last couple months. And you guys might be well served to look at a programmatic agreement to cover all of these projects in one compliance. And I just wanted to make that suggestion if it was something that you hadn't thought of in the past. So you may qualify for a CADX, but you may want to look at these projects all together rather than having each individual fire department have to go through a compliance process with a consultant. So that's just my suggestion.
Thank you, Christiana.
Our next public comment will come from OFA Marin.
Hi, this is Belle Cole, and I'm calling from to say something about the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership and the work they're doing on best management practices for the MWPA. And the process is moving right along, and we have we've worked with environmental groups, and they're at a stage now where we're going to be reviewing and making them available to you through our steering committee. I just wanted to be sure that they cover defensible space, veg management, and carbon management, and just wanted to be sure there was room for them in this process that you're working through, and we can pursue this at another time, but I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Belle.
Looking for any further raised hands from our audience members. And there's no further public comment.
And just a reminder, Mark, there was no email sent in.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and we'll bring it back to the committee. With the programmatic agreement, and I believe MWPA kind of looked at that component of it.
Yeah, with our correspondence with Remy Moose Manley, the idea is that we're going to move through a project work year, maybe two, and evaluate the workload that we are being impacted by the individual projects, and use that as our barometer of whether or not we need a programmatic EIR. The SRA is treatable areas are already covered by that Cal VTP programmatic EIR. So if we find that the vast majority of our projects that are going to need large scale environmental compliance work fall within the SRA treatable areas, and we can leverage that programmatic EIR, then maybe we don't need to do it on our own. But if we start seeing a tremendous workload for projects that are outside of the treatable areas, that's when we'll evaluate the need for a programmatic.
Perfect. And then in response to Bill Cole's comments on environmentally sound practices, definitely that is a component of what we do on our end to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can that is environmentally sound, and definitely we will take any recommendations that your committee brings forward. With that, we're on to number 9, any information items. We can go around the horn with the committee to see if anybody's got any information for the group.
I think something that we just started working through this week that might impact some other agencies is a lot of, obviously China Camp's one of our big concerns, but state land that has, that they'll do private exemptions already and encroachment permits. And so we've started the initial conversation to see if, as a city, basically, we could apply for the encroachment permit for vast swaths of China Camp so that we can create that D space. And that seems like it might be a good path forward. So we're excited about that, to be able to work on some state land, at least to get that 100-foot buffer, and that might impact some other folks. Very early in the process.
Hey, Ruben, it's Jordan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Hey, it's kind of just informational, I think, for the group, and a lot partially because most of us will be developing projects as well. But, you know, CAL FIRE, we had a meeting yesterday, vegetation, you know, defensible space kind of pre-fire engineering, and they are opening up this year's, they are going to do the grant applications again as they had in years past. And Joy Tucker, I know Mark's familiar with, you know, was very interested in what MWPA has going on, especially for that, you know, the partnership to kind of levy funds, right, where we have opportunities to go after some additional CAL FIRE funds, you know, with the intent that, you know, there are existing funds here in the county to match that. And I know it kind of gives me a little bit more anxiety than I already have, asking for more money when there seems to be a bunch early on. But just to put that everybody's, as you're planning stuff, there is going to be a request for additional CAL FIRE requests, and the same model that's been the last couple of years is coming out again here. So just keep that in the back of your pocket as well.
That's great information. Thanks, Jordan. Anyone else? No. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 10. Committee members requesting any future agenda items, something we can put on for our next meeting.
It may not work in this large format, but one thing for consideration is maybe picking a couple projects and really just going through as though it was approved in every step of the way. Because I think a lot of the things coming up is just like timeline confusions, or when what happens, or just all those little details that functionally we need to start working out as we move through into FY 21-22. And so maybe just doing that as a group, or maybe as a subcommittee, and then sharing the questions might be beneficial.
Okay, so I got this correct, is picking a project and then just basically running through it with a fine-tooth comb and just seeing how the process will go.
Yeah, and I think that would help us develop the forms too.
Okay, perfect.
I like that idea too. That sounds great. A great recommendation.
Almost like a tabletop exercise.
There you go. Perfect. Perfect. That way we're all on the same page.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Anyone else? Okay. With that, it looks like we got to the point of an adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second it just in time for my next Zoom.
So motion made by Larry Passero Kentfield, second by Sean Condry at San Anselmo. With that, meeting adjourned is at 16:18 hours and that's 4:18 for those non-military hour people. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Mark.